Welcome to the show. My name is Karen Holton. I am an ET experiencer and ambassador, an ascension coach, a direct channel, a shamanic guide, and I'm the host of Aliens and Astrology. Be sure to check out more of my unique content on my website, www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, and my YouTube, Odyssey, and Telegram channels, Karen Holton TV. I can also be found on the Forbidden Knowledge News Network, www.forbiddenknowledge.news. My paranormal experiences have taught me to replace my beliefs with working theories, which evolve over time. My co-host is Dave Petrella, and although we hold two different viewpoints, we both see things from the same broad perspective, and we are both passionate about the ascension process.
Hi, I'm Dave Petrella. I'm an astrologer, biologist, spiritual guide, and Oak Island theorist. You can find me on Facebook and YouTube at Dave Petrella, and on Instagram at Dave Petrella12. Please feel free to send me an email through my YouTube page. I'm happy to join Karen in our search for truth. We can find the answers we're looking for about health, science, extraterrestrial intelligence, and many other related topics. We're glad to have you join us today for the show. Hey everyone, welcome to Aliens and Astrology. I'm very excited today. We have my good friend here, Alessandra Nadudvari, from the Curse of Oak Island television show, which of course you guys know I've worked with two different years, 2017, 2018. And it's a really hot topic right now. We've got season 10 on TV. They're making some really big discoveries, so I'm really excited to talk about that. So without further ado, I'll actually just introduce my friend here, Alessandra. Alessandra Nadudvari was born and raised in Czechoslovakia. She now lives in Nova Scotia, Canada with her husband Tim and their son Nicky. Alessandra writes juvenile fiction books and has a series called Adventures with Nicky. She loves Oak Island and the Knights Templar. She appeared in season 4, episode 1 of The Curse of Oak Island on the History Channel, as well as a Canadian paranormal series called Sightseers. Alessandra, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
So nice to have you here. We really appreciate it.
Yes, I'm happy to hear, and I'm happy to be here and happy to share what I know about Oak Island, even though I feel like everybody probably already knows everything.
Oh no, I know hardly anything about it.
No?
But I did watch the show you did with Dave. I think it was a 3-part. It was very, very interesting. That was such a great show. We're going to put the links in the description below. But besides that, the only thing I know about Oak Island is something to do with pirates. And I'm all for everything to do with pirates. So I'm just going to take a back step. But welcome to the show and welcome to all the viewers. And this is just going to be great.
Thank you, Karen. Okay,
very
my involvement with Oak Island and the Curse of Oak Island has been going on since, I would say, 2015, 2016. I knew some of the protagonists before they were famous. For example, Doug Kroll, Scott Barlow. I met them on Oak Island and in Facebook groups that discussed the mystery and history of Oak Island. So I made friends with them before they got involved in the show. And I can say that they are the same in real life as they are on the screen. So they are quite authentic, and I really appreciate that about them. My interest in Oak Island dates back before 2015. I actually feel like Oak Island kind of came into my path when I first came to Nova Scotia as an immigrant. And I rented this house on the First Peninsula outside of Lunenburg. And the house had a collection of books. I like history, and I feel that if I move to a new place, I should educate myself about its history. So I like to read local history books and, travel guides and things like that. So I picked up this one book that was on the mantelpiece in the house, and it was called Holy Grail Across the Atlantic. And my eyes went, like this, because I was like, what? There's Holy Grail in Nova Scotia? Where? So I followed the book as a sort of a informal guide to all the mysteries in Nova Scotia, and it led me to Oak Island, to New Ross, and some other places. And I have since learned that a lot of the material in the book was not quite realistic, but that's okay. It's part of the journey, when you have to sift through all the mythology and the legends and the lore, and then try to reconcile it with what's right there in front of you in real life.
That's the fun part too, right, Alessandra?
Yeah, right.
Sifting through all the exciting material.
Yes. And I never expected to get involved in the Curse of Oak Island, the show. It mostly happened thanks to my friendship with Doug, and the fact that me and my husband own the property in New Ross that's popularly known as the Castle or Castle Ruins. So we were featured in the 4th season of the Curse of Oak Island as the owners of the property. And we basically discussed the possibility that it too is a very old mystery, and that it's somehow tied to Oak Island.
I'm sorry, Alessandra. Season 4 was actually the first one that I saw from the very first episode of the season. So when you guys came on the show, you were the first people that I saw. I was like, I was sitting there with my snacks and everything, getting ready for that 4th season right there. I came in somewhere in the 3rd season, was probably midway, and then I actually went back to the season 1 and started season 1 again.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, great! So it was actually a very fun day of filming, but also a very long day. If you just watch the show and never see how it's made or what it takes and how many people and how much equipment it takes to actually film just one episode, it's quite a shock when you see the production, what it takes to film this one episode. So we probably hosted somewhere between 30 and 40 people at New Ross that day, and they stayed all day. And in the end, we had these great conversations. The best conversation happens off camera. So of course, yeah. It did not get recorded, but I remember having a great conversation with everybody who came that day, including members of the crew. So the crew, like the cameramen and the sound guys.
They're great too. I agree. They're really personable and easy to get along with. Okay, so just so people know, New Ross is about 20 minutes north of Oak Island?
Yes, roughly.
Okay,
yeah, so
pretty much directly north, essentially, right?
It's inland, and there's a highway that leads there. So if you find yourself near Chester or Chester Basin, you will quickly be redirected to New Ross, and that highway actually continues to Annapolis Valley, so it connects the South Shore with the northern shore, with the Bay of Fundy. And New Ross is smack in the middle of that landmass, so you can see that it's a very good location, strategically speaking, because if you're at New Ross, you can go the same distance to Annapolis Valley, the Bay of Fundy, and same distance to the South Shore. So depending on where you want to go, you're somewhere in between.
And it's also up pretty high, so you get a good view of 360 around you, right?
Yes, although there are quite a few trees in New Ross still. And I can imagine how the view might not have been, so open at the time, like hundreds of years ago. You would just see trees and the lake, of course, Lake Lawson. and the Gold River, but you probably wouldn't be able to see the shore, the ocean.
And of course, the Gold River, it actually leads directly to Mahone Bay, where Oak Island is. So you could technically just like, I mean, I'm sure it's on private land, a lot of it, but you could technically like follow the river all the way down to Mahone Bay, and you'd be pretty much right at Oak Island, which is, it's important to understand the possible involvement of certain groups of people, right, Alessandra?
Yes. So yes, if we are speaking about so strictly about gold and just the perspective of let's find gold and, you know, where is it the most accessible? If you were to sail into Mahone Bay, you would find the mouth of the Gold River. And then, yes, you could follow it upstream and it will lead you to where New Ross is today. And I think that centuries ago, you could probably find gold nuggets in the water. In fact, some people still go gold panning in the Gold River, on the Gold River.
Oh, wow.
They find, I think, mostly gold sand. I think it's pretty rare nowadays to find the nuggets. But yes, there are still active gold mining claims on the Gold River. But, you know, it's something that you need permission for from the government. So it would have been an attraction to Europeans, because as we know, wherever Europeans went during the Age of Discovery, like number one priority was find gold, right? That's what the Spaniards were looking for when they came to Central and South America.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yep.
And also, speaking of gold, if you were to continue west of Oak Island, you would come to Lunenburg and then this park called the Ovens. And there was a gold rush in the 1800s in the Ovens. And so there are these caves in the park. There are sea caves that look like they might have started off as some kind of a primitive gold mine, and then the ocean just enlarged it, you know, and made it into an actual cave.
That's interesting. I didn't know it. I didn't know that it actually made it bigger. That's really interesting. The ocean.
So anyway, yes, on the south shore of Nova Scotia, there are several places where we know for a fact there was gold mining happening. And I can easily picture men looking for gold on Oak Island itself or storing it there. It could have been some kind of a vault or secret bank, you know, where they kept it.
Yeah, and there is a story too about people looking for, well, I guess they pulled pyrite off the island, if I'm not mistaken, which is called fool's gold. Mm-hmm. If you know, it's pretty convincing. If you just glance at it, you'd be like, oh wow, gold. But you know,
right.
it's a different mineral. But I don't know if we've actually found direct evidence of that mining on Oak Island, though. I don't think we found the actual mines and stuff like that, right?
Maybe not mines or gold seams, but there were mining tools found on Oak Island.
Oh, definitely.
For example, picks and swage. Swage is a sharpening tool. I think Carmen Legg, who they invite as expert to identify metal artifacts on the show, he said that the swage was very, very old, possibly from the 1400s. And they found one swage, but it fell apart. So it looked like it was two, but it's actually two halves of the same swage. And I have a picture of it, again, if I can find it.
Yeah, no problem.
Open it.
Yeah, on that episode, it's amazingly how robust this piece of metal is. I mean, it's very, very, very stable. You know, thick piece of metal for sharpening tools back then. And what he's saying was back to the 1400s, right? I mean, I believe he was shocked to see that on there because of its antiquity. Yes,
and I made an interview with Carmen Legg too a while ago, and he said that he thought there was some kind of serious mining activity or tunneling activity on Oak Island, which took place over several months, and there were many men involved. I don't know how many he said, but maybe 100, 200. So a large group of men involved in some serious, heavy work.
Yeah, I found it really interesting and also kind of strange that there's not the exact documentation of that happening. Everything about this island, guys, is very mysterious. It's like,
yes.
Okay, so and Alessandra will get into the story in a few minutes here, but if you buried something, surely there would be people that knew about it, including the Native Americans, who were called the Mi'kmaq, who were native to Nova Scotia and New Brunswick area, and I think PEI, Prince Edward Island as well, Canada. And it's like, we don't have any testimony, and it's like if you did that much excavation, something would be there. It's very mysterious, very mysterious. Everything surrounding Oak Island.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep tabs on the Oak Island team as they release, season after season of The Curse of Oak Island, and I stay tuned to the show, and I'm very interested in every new artifact that they find. And I, add it to my own memory bank and try to kind of evaluate all the various theories based on the new finds. And you will see that certain theories kind of go up and down in popularity depending on the finds. So yeah, it's a very good show, and I like how millions of people around the world watch it because they want something to be found. They want the mystery to be solved. So there's like this collective effort that I think uplifts the whole enterprise.
Oh, definitely. And it's also, I think it's a really good springboard for research. I mean,
yes,
all the topics that come up, and myself included, when I started watching the show, there were so many things I actually had never even heard of before.
Right.
And so
right.
when I was preparing to go to the island, I did huge amounts of research just to try to understand a lot of this history of Atlantic Canada. And then, of course, we'll get into Knights Templar. That was something I didn't know much about. Portuguese exploration, Basque fishermen in Oak Island. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Just amazing, the history. And also, of course, Rick Lagina, the star of the show, he always talks about how it brings families together, it brings people together. It's a positive activity, so I fully endorse it.
Yes.
It is based in Hollywood, but apart from that, I love watching the show as it comes out. And of course, just so you guys know, I was there for season 5. That was the season that they actually filmed my work. So it's just the season after Alessandra. And then I went back in 2018 as well, which would have been season 6. And so I've been following it very closely too, just to, again, like Alessandra said, keep it in the back of my mind, the memory bank, in case I need it someday. And it always comes back. I mean, there's things you guys saw. I just did and I think you guys saw it too, Alessandra, Ghost to Bacon podcast with Jake Roberts on his YouTube channel, Ghost to Bacon. And we were talking about the 1611 King James Bible and how it has a map in it. And Jake traced it, that it led to Oak Island. And I saw some things in that I said, wow, there's something going on here. And I hadn't spent time with Francis Bacon since probably like 2015 or maybe even 2014. And then suddenly, and I don't really follow the Bacon storyline very much. I am now, because things have, for me at least, things have changed a little bit in terms of information.
Okay.
When I see a map, because I'll just put it this way: the way that I came at the island with my theory and everything was purely mathematics. It was math and it was angles. And I did work with Nolan's Cross, of course, in the Money Pit and everything, if you guys know about the show. But when I see someone giving a really good effort that actually has a map in front of them, or something that could be construed as a map, I can use mathematics and angles to try to make that legitimate or see if it's not legitimate. And so it was an exciting opportunity for me to look at that. But in any case, so now I used to take all kinds of notes and do heavy research. I mean, I was spent 3-4 hours per episode, plus like 2 hours watching the rerun.
Okay.
This was as I was getting ready to go to the island, way back in 2017. And now I still watch it. I keep up to date like Alessandra, but it's more, I just watch the episode. And if there's, I keep it to literally one line on a page. If I have a couple notes to take, I just write that for the episode. And then if I need to go back through the season, I just can pull it, because I know what I'm looking for, at this point. It's 10 seasons. I've been to the island multiple times, as has Alessandra. So just wrote a few things down, but I'm not doing heavy. I have a lot of other research that I'm doing, so I don't have the time for the Oak Island stuff. Plus, I already know where I want to search if I get another opportunity here. So
it can very easily take over your life and consume all the time and energy you've got. So
and you've experienced that just like I have, right?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. I got pulled into the various theories mostly when I started reading the books. My favorite book is, I think, the first one I read, which is Oak Island Gold by William Crocker.
Crocker, yeah.
And then Darcy O'Connor's book is great. And after that, I picked up some books about specific theories. For example, there is one, I think by John O'Brien, about the Aztec theory.
That's a good one, Alessandra. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is only one book about the Aztec theory, and it's O'Brien's book. And you can, I think, order it on Amazon and Chapters Indigo, which is a Canadian bookstore chain. So I think I also read some of the less exciting theories. Mm-hmm. There was Joy Steele's theory about how Oak Island was used for production of tar, I believe.
Okay.
Yep. Or like tar pitch. Yes. But, I'm open-minded, and there's always something that I didn't know that I can find in a book and add it to, my own knowledge.
Oh, definitely. And yes. Speaking of Aztec, the episode coming up for the United States it's Tuesdays, and I think for Canada it's Sunday, right, Alessandra? Afterwards.
Yes, we are a week behind, essentially.
Which is kind of strange, seeing that Oak Island is actually in Canada, not the United States. But in any case,
it's okay.
Oh yeah. So the thing though is that the next episode is they do a preview after the end of each episode for the next episode, of the season for the following week. And for this one, for last week, they were showing an artifact, and it looks like it looked Mesoamerican to me. I'll put it that way. And I know from my perspective, I know that that's what they're going to try to pitch because of the expert that they brought in. And I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now, but he's been on Ancient Aliens quite a bit, which is the same production company as the Curse of Oak Island.
Well spotted, Dave.
Yeah. And see, this is what happens when you get really into it and you do it for many years, is that the people, the key players and everything, even before they're introduced. Mm-hmm. So he's actually a Mayan expert, Alessandra.
Wow.
And he's
amazing.
talked about the calendar a few times, and it did look slightly Mesoamerican to me. So we'll see what's going on with that. But having said that, when you have pirates and privateers, which we know were both on the island in and around Mahone Bay for many, many years, technically, I'm not trying to burst the bubble or anything because it's very exciting, but technically, if you loot something, if say this, like you mentioned, the Spanish being down in Mesoamerica and South America and everything, there's going to be stuff from, probably from Mayans and from Aztecs and maybe Incans and all this stuff on the ship, with your other gold and booty and all the treasures and stuff like that. So it doesn't surprise me by itself, but, and I think Carmen Legg would agree with this, the context is very important. So if you find it, depending where you find it, depending how deep it's buried, depending on what it's with, what it is, maybe it's more than what I'm thinking, but I'm always optimistic.
Right. Yes. If it is, let's say, an Aztec or Mayan artifact, doesn't mean it was Aztecs or Mayans who brought it there. It could have come on a Spanish ship, as you said, as part of a bigger loot. And the Spanish ships, I think a lot of them passed by Nova Scotia on the way back to Europe because of the water currents and wind currents. So you sail up the coast of the United States, you go by Nova Scotia. This is your last chance to get fresh water and food and maybe fix your ship. And then you go home to Europe. You pass by Ireland, and then you can go down to Western Europe. Yeah.
And of course, I believe that's called the Gulf Stream, which brings
warm water.
Right,
yes, I meant Gulf Stream, yes.
Right, from the Caribbean. And what's amazing, because it keeps actually Nova Scotia fairly warm warmer than it probably otherwise would be. And
yes,
in addition to that, Ireland and also UK, because it goes right past those two, they're really far north. I mean, like London is really far north. It's actually pretty shocking when I look at the map, because I was born in Connecticut, and so that's, I think, 42 maybe latitude, something like that, where I'm from. And it's Nova Scotia or Oak Island's about 45, and then UK I thought was like 50 something. It's actually quite a bit further north than any of those. So thank goodness for I'm sure they're thankful for the Gulf Stream over in UK.
Yeah, well, and we also have hundreds and hundreds of shipwrecks that are along the coast of Nova Scotia. There is even Sable Island, which is called the graveyard of the Atlantic, because there are so many wrecks just around that island. I believe it's because it has a sandbar, and a lot of ships would just, run atop it and not be able to leave. So
don't they have a wild
there's a lot of treasure in the water.
Oh yeah. Don't they have wild horses out there from some of the Spanish maybe that left them there? It's pretty amazing.
Yes, the wild horses on Sable Island came from probably a shipwreck, or they were set there by settlers or farmers to graze, and they stayed, and nobody's allowed to touch them, but you can go there to observe them. Have you been there, Alessandra? No, I think the only way to get there is by a small airplane, or a boat, but you have to have permission. It's not open to everyone. Okay. And I think these tours of Sable Island are scheduled, so you have to pay and go when it's available. But there's a movie about the horses on Sable Island, and the actress is Jane Seymour, very beautiful woman. Yeah, okay. Yes. Yeah, wasn't she? I thought she was in James Bond movie, wasn't she? I don't know, but she was in the series called Dr. Quinn that was very popular. I don't know if you ever watched it. I did. I don't think I have, but is it a spy thing? Kind of like James Bond? No. It's like a historical Wild West type of series about this female doctor, probably in the 1800s, who goes somewhere in the Wild West. I don't remember the location. And at first, the people there reject her because, she's a woman. What does she want? Heal people? Why is she not married? And, right, yeah. Who's in charge of her affairs? So she has to prove herself first to the people and then to other professionals. So because, she's a female, and that profession, I think, was dominated by men at the time. But I think it all ends well in the end. So. Oh, good. Great. Yep. Okay. Well, should we go into the Oak Island story, Alessandra? Yes. I'm really excited to talk about what... Okay, now that we have covered popular TV shows. Right. Okay. So let's talk about why Oak Island is such a big mystery and what makes it that way, and also the initial discovery that has propelled everything forward, which, of course, if people don't know, Oak Island is the longest treasure hunt in history since 1795. That's on the books since 1795. I believe it's a lot older than that. Or maybe I'll say a lot. I mean, at least like 50 years older than that minimum for me. And actually, the first settlers on the island were I believe were in the 1750s. A lot of them came from New England, if I'm not mistaken. And what I heard was that it was the first island that was actually parceled out to be sold as lots in Canada. Yes. Is that true? I don't know if it was the first one to go through that process in the entire Canada, but I do know that it was surveyed by a government surveyor who then divided it into all these lots. Okay. And there is, a suspicion that the man might have been a Freemason because of the number of lots that he chose. Yeah, there's no question. There is 30, no question. 32 lots or something like that, which is a Masonic, a number important to Freemasons. There have been many Freemasons involved in the, and they still are with the Oak Island search. And so there is something going on, especially, like I said, when I approach the island, I look at mathematics because numbers really don't lie generally. Numbers and angles and measurements and stuff like that. It's kind of the language of the universe between that and sound and light in geometry. So
there's a lot of other 32s and 33s and stuff like that around the island, and we can maybe talk about some of them. But that's the first mystery. What's going on? Why are the Freemasons involved with this? What are they interested in?
Well, the Freemasons, I think, would have been mostly based in Halifax in the 1700s, and I think they would have kept a low profile at the time because the Masonic lodges were disapproved of by, or the Brotherhood itself was disapproved of by the Catholic Church, and so they would have kept a low profile, I think, although they would have tried to get influential men to join. And interestingly enough, in Mahone Bay, there is a town called Chester, and there was a Masonic lodge in Chester. I don't know if it was the first one in Nova Scotia, but definitely one of the first ones, one of the oldest lodges. And I also think that that lodge is no longer in existence, and the records from it might have contained information about Oak Island, because the Freemasons on Oak Island would have been members of the Chester Lodge, right? That was the closest. So I feel like that's a loss right there, that this lodge in Chester is no longer in existence and nobody seems to know where the records went. There was an Oak Island historian and theorist, Kel Hancock, who was on the show in the earlier seasons, but he no longer participates. And he was a either a librarian or archivist for the Freemasons in Nova Scotia, and he tried to find these records. He looked high and low.
Oh, wow, okay.
For the records from the Chester Lodge, but he couldn't locate them. Yeah, so yes, Freemasons had their hands on Oak Island from the get-go.
Freemasonry, in terms of Canada, it started in Nova Scotia, right?
Yes. And we would actually have to move the clock way back before the 1700s, all the way to 1600s. That was the time of Sir William Alexander, who was a Scottish nobleman. He tried to colonize Nova Scotia for King James. We'll come to him later, but I'll just say that he and other men from his family and from his country are said to have been the first Freemasons, that he was the one who started Freemasonry in Nova Scotia. So I think unofficially, yes, Freemasonry goes back to the 1600s and is tied to Sir William Alexander.
And then before that, we also had Rosicrucians, which was in this 15, I thought. Well,
yes, 1500s. Yeah.
15 and 1600s, right?
Yes.
And then before that, you have the Knights Templar. And a lot of people think that there's a lineage that goes with these three groups of people, which I agree with. Do you agree with that, Alessandra?
I know that that's part of the Masonic history and their legends or mythology, but I don't think that there is actually material evidence to prove that this was the flow, right. From Templars to Rosicrucians and Freemasons. Although the ideas and a lot of the ideas and principles and just general philosophy is there. They are in a way the same, like the foundational beliefs and principles are the same. And
of course, the idea of preserving wisdom and keeping the true teaching safe and being good stewards of that, I think is very similar.
Yes. And I do see either a religious or sacred angle on Oak Island. And you and I touched upon that in our interview on YouTube. We talked about, astronomy, astrology, and what is sacred and why it was marked out on Oak Island in the form of Nolan's cross. So,
absolutely. And if you guys want to see that show, I was on Alessandra's show called Templar Island, and it's on her YouTube page. I believe it's still up there. And it's also on my YouTube channel.
Oh, good.
three parts.
Yes.
So go check. That was a while ago. That was actually last summer, I believe. So go check that out, guys. It was a great information there.
Yeah. So yes, the history of Oak Island treasure hunt started in 1795, and I believe it was shrouded in legend and mythology from the start, because they say that even the story of the discovery of Money Pit already had some Freemasonic elements to it. So the discoverers, or the men who found the Money Pit on Oak Island, were Daniel McGuinness, Anthony Vaughan, John Smith, and possibly Samuel Ball. They apparently saw lights in the forest or in the woods on Oak Island, and they thought they should check it out in case it meant pirates or, soldiers. They didn't find anyone, but they did find a big oak tree with a round depression in the ground near the oak tree, as well as a tackle block that was attached to the tree. And they thought that it was a good idea to start digging in that round depression in case it contained pirate treasure. And they dug about 25 feet before they realized that it was going to be a bigger job than they originally thought, and they needed help. So I thought that's a cool story, except we know that those men also lived on the island, and then they weren't that young. They were in their 30s. So there's some, tweaking of the facts right there and shrouding them.
I actually think that they parceled out that island first because they knew there was indications of something to do with Freemasonry and or Templars on the island.
Okay.
And so they already had the land, and they already knew that was there. And then maybe, it would have made it easier to be local, obviously.
Right.
Once you get there, you can search freely. But yeah, anyway, but the thing too is that when they found this depression, the story too is that supposedly there were 3 trees, and I forget about this, in a triangle with each other. And so in a perfect triangle around the Money Pit depression, and they had markings on them and symbols. And there's this block and tackle hanging above this pit, which, by the way, is a really very well-known Freemason symbol for many of their degrees and such. And they also found, as they began to dig, the first thing they found was it's called a threshing floor, or that's what they called it. There's these paved like flagstones, paving stones, about 2 feet down, and it formed what would be called a threshing floor across the top of this depression. The depression's 12 or 13 feet in diameter, which in itself is pretty suspicious because that's a very important, again, very mystical and important number for societies, secret societies. And then the threshing floor is it's also generally thought of as a spiritual symbol, meaning that you basically sweep away the chaff or the impurities in your heart and your mind to rise to higher levels. But it was used initially for wheat, essentially, to get the grains out of the wheat and from the stalks and everything like that. And then beneath that too, Alessandra, of course, there was a 10-foot platforms, or excuse me, every 10 feet there was a platform made of I think they thought it was oak logs.
Yes.
And then every 10 feet down, then like you said, when they got down to 25 feet or 30 feet, they said, wait, this is not going to be easy. And you get down you get down that far, it starts to get dangerous if you don't have proper equipment. So,
well, if I could bring you back up to the ground, you said 3 oak trees. So we have a triangle, and then the depression in the ground, basically between or among the 3 oak trees. Could we think of that as it being the all-seeing eye?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And actually, I actually hadn't thought of that part before. That's a very good point. And that's on the back of our currency in the United States as well. I mean,
yes.
So I thought it was a $1 bill, if I'm not mistaken. There's a pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the top of it.
Yeah, there's a floating capstone, yes, and then there's the eye in the center.
They may have even made the pupil and everything in terms of not just having a round. We don't know that because we weren't there. We don't have that kind of document. I wouldn't be surprised if when they cleared it off, it was actually an eye, you know, not just like a circle. It was actually, you could see the other parts of the eye and stuff. That's a really good point, Alessandra. I like that one a lot.
Okay, good. So if these men who discovered the money pit, if they were actually Freemasons themselves, it's possible that this place on Oak Island with the trees and the money pit was actually a place where they met and held some kind of ceremonies or conducted, you know, Masonic rituals, because we know that as you rise in the Freemasonic order, you have to pass through different tests and ceremonies, right? I think at some point they even put a noose around your neck and then lead you by the rope, right?
And I think the well, the money pit, first of all, the money pit model, in terms of if you know anything about esotericism, is based on the Solomon's Temple Enochian vaults, which were supposed to be beneath the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. And there were basically nine levels, you know, equally spaced apart. And at the ninth, well, I'll let you tell the rest of it, but at the ninth level, there's something specific that's placed down there. So when you see these two parallels, you're like, okay. So me and Alessandra had talked about that on her show over the summertime, that it does seem that, for what I believe actually also about it, is that it was partially used as an initiation site, because, you know, the Freemason group, they do have all kinds of ritualistic events that they do, and degrees and rites and stuff like that in order to move up through the ranks. So, you know, that's what it looks like to me. So I'm going with that's essentially what it is, except there's a lot more to it than that. And, and I'll let you continue.
Well, and if these Freemasons happened to own all the lots or most of the lots on Oak Island, it's possible that Freemasons from all the way from Halifax came to Oak Island and, you know, do these ceremonies with them, because Freemasonry was not exactly widely accepted at the time. It was frowned upon by the church, right? I believe that the church actually advocated against it and warned people to not join the fraternity. So I could easily picture Freemasons from Halifax coming to Oak Island to, you know, be with their other brothers and do stuff there that they couldn't do in Halifax, because who would see them in the forest, right? No one.
Oh, exactly. And, you know, there's a lot of societies that even do that to this day. They meet somewhere remote and they have their ceremonies or whatever. I have no idea what they do. I actually don't really want to know what they do.
Okay.
Because I'm not, well, meaning that, you know, I'm a person that is full disclosure. Like I'll just, if you ask me a question, I'll just tell you what it is. You know, I'm not trying to mask anything or hide anything. But no, it's a very good point. And actually, I also believe that they were doing that there in terms of initiations because of something that was much older. I don't think actually they necessarily built the money pit down there. I think they knew it was there. They used it because they knew it was there. But the story behind that is older than that. And, you know, well, I think we'll get into some of that, which is going to get really exciting. But yeah, definitely, please continue.
So in the money pit, yes, there were all these layers, and these layers were uncovered in the year 1803 through 1805, and it was done by the Onslow Company. So these men organized themselves, set up the Onslow Company, and probably with some money and equipment, they started doing more thorough excavation. At 30 feet, they supposedly found a layer of charcoal and coconut fiber. At 40 feet, it was putty. Being, you know, frugal Nova Scotians, they took that putty out of the money pit and used it to seal windows on houses.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay.
At 50 feet, they found beach stones, which is interesting for me because I remember there was a layer of beach stones found in 10X by a diver who was hired by Dan Blankenship. And the diver said that the beach stones were arranged by a human hand, that they did not look like a natural setup. So beach stones in 10X and beach stones in Money Pit.
And 10, I'll just say really quickly, Alessandra, 10X was a an alternate shaft, excuse me, an
Yes.
alternate shaft dug by a man named Dan Blankenship, I believe in the 60s or early
Yes.
70s. And it was because dowsing is when you use the rods to find underground chambers or cavities, maybe fill with water, maybe open tunnels, all kinds of things. And the thing about that is that he found an opening way under the bedrock. I mean, this is like 235 feet down. It's very, very far. And then it took him many, many, many years. He put tanker cars from railroad cars that had been in disservice, and he lifted them up, put them essentially perpendicular to the ground, and then reinforced the hole that he was digging with the tanker car. It's actually beyond belief. And then he dove down there many, many times, and he found some really interesting things. And this is probably like what, about 75 feet away from the money pit, maybe to the northeast, something like that.
Yes, it sits on a higher ground. So if you go to Oak Island and the money pit area, you have to climb up a little higher to get to 10X. And yes, you're right. Dan Blankenship used dowsing. He was, I believe, looking for the flood tunnels that are said to be below the surface, because he, of course, would have wanted to block at least one flood tunnel to keep whatever shaft he had going from flooding.
Don't skip over this brief commercial break. Dave and I have some important information for you. You may have noticed that participation in our community does not depend on memberships or donations, and we do not hide our episodes behind a paywall. We want everyone to have the opportunity to learn and share our important content with others. Dave and I both offer services which may make your journey more fulfilling, and I offer some products as well. Our sales and services are what provide us with the means to continue our work, as there are many expenses associated with our mission. Check out our offerings to find that which resonates with you to help create a win-win situation. What I mean by that is financial support to help cover our expenses, but also some great products and services to give you that edge that you've been looking for. Check out my online shop, www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, to find Zendome's orgone generators, comfort crystals, and an array of vital services, all designed to help you to become the change that you wish to see in the world. Now, more than ever, people are awakening to a world we never imagined possible. In response, Dave and I are offering tools, methods, and podcast content to assist you with your awakening process. You are not alone, and there is still much we can do to support our health, emotions, and our spirituality. We both combine ancient wisdoms with cutting-edge technology to help bring comfort to your body, happiness to your mind, and joy to your spirit. To assist you with your life journey, check out my website and find many valuable resources. There's the 9 Steps to Quantum Health Transformation. This is a free, comprehensive online course. Learn about detoxification and nutrition, grounding and spiritual practices, and an advanced version of the Law of Attraction, giving you more of what you really want out of life. I also have my Zendome's Orgonite, which is my unique brand of orgone generators. They're ethically sourced and handmade by a friend of mine, and they're double charged for maximum effect. I also carry comfort crystals, which is a limited collection of energetically infused semi-precious stones. I have an array of vital services, so you can get the one-on-one support that you've been looking for. Also coaching, guidance, and I do assessments and also workshops. And then again, there are the many free resources available on my website. wisdom to assist with energetic ascension into physical, mental, and spiritual paradise. Also, check out Dave's services. Dave can teach you about astrology and spiritual concepts, principles of Eastern medicine, birth charts, relationship matching, spiritual guidance, fasting, and his unique approach to health. You can find Dave's services on his Facebook page, Instagram at Dave Petrella 12, and his YouTube channel. The links can be found in the description box below. Let us share our quantum work with you. It's your turn to heal, evolve, and thrive. Believe in your ability to succeed. Now, let's get back to the show.
The idea is that they're all connected somehow underground. There's like this big network of like water-filled tunnels, which I know it's hard to imagine that. It's very strange, you know, in terms of the story. But can you you're probably getting to it, Alessandra, but can you tell people what happened at like the 90-foot level with the flood tunnels and stuff like that?
Right. So at 90 feet, what the Oslo company men found was a stone slab with a cipher, and the slab was face down. So the symbols would have been on the bottom level or bottom side of it, not up. So as they found the stone, they probably would have lifted it and seen the symbols, but they couldn't read them. And we actually don't know what those symbols said because nobody had the presence of mind to copy them. And this is sadly a story that repeats itself on Oak Island. Many things were found, but not recorded properly. And, you know. And
that also leads some people to believe it was a forgery. Used to make money for certain groups, you know, saying, "Oh, there's this big treasure. We check out this stone we found." They brought it to Halifax, put it in the bookbindery shop, and then used it to get money for the search. So I believe it was real personally, but you know, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here because that's what I do. You know, you have to go on both sides, but
but as you and I discussed months ago, in the Enochian vault, the last level of the Enochian vault contained stone that was triangular in shape, and on that stone was the ineffable name of God. So it's entirely possible that what was written on or carved on the 90-foot stone was not a warning, you know, like stop digging, you're going to die, but the name of God. And Freemasons would have loved that. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. That's the model of the Enochian chambers beneath Solomon's temple. So, and the other thing, well, essentially, the interesting part about the translation, the supposed translation on the stone was 10 feet below what 2 million pounds are buried, and meaning pounds, you know, it's a form of money, a denomination of money. And then there was another translation that said, I think 30 feet below that much money is buried. So for me, well, if I don't know if you have it in your notes, Alessandra. If you do, I'll let you tell that part of the story. What happened when they lifted the stone, and then they kind of left for the weekend, basically.
Yes, they uncovered or removed the 90-foot stone, and then at 98 feet, they found the last wooden platform. And yes, they left, and when they returned, the money pit was flooded. It was full of water. And they did have at least one pump, but eventually it failed, and they couldn't pump out the water. And it is said that the water filled up to the level of the tide. So if the money pit was indeed connected to these flood tunnels, the flood tunnels, of course, lead to the ocean. You can't pump out the ocean. Right. It will just keep flowing back in. Yeah, so they made a fatal mistake of digging past the 90-foot stone and then leaving. Well, maybe luckily that, you know, they left, because they probably would have died if the money pit suddenly flooded with them there.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing too about this is that, well, first of all, when it flooded, it was a slow, my understanding is a pretty slow trickle in the beginning. And because I guess the idea is that, okay, so there's one or more what we call flood tunnels coming from the ocean. We're down 100 feet on the island here. And the flood tunnels, the idea is that if you lift the stone, it's going to flood the shaft, which means that whatever's beneath the stone, you can't get to, which is supposed to be the treasure. And actually, in fact, they did probe at that level Alessandra was talking about, the 98-foot level, with like a iron rod, and they said they hit something. They thought it was a chest, something nature like that. So and then they went back and they came back, I guess the story is after church on a Sunday afternoon or something, and it had flooded. Probably took a little while for the first time, because the idea is that when you lift that stone, it breaches some kind of seal, that's holding the water back from the ocean stuff. Right. But the thing about this that's the most interesting to me, of course, and I talked about this on Jake's show last week, and I talked about it on your show too, Alessandra, and I say it all the time, is that it flooded to within 33 feet of the surface of the ground. And
there's that number, 33.
Yeah, exactly. So that is not like random. That's really strange. In fact, you've got, and that's not the only thing. Those are just two examples, but you got 32 lots and then 32 or 33 feet of flooding, which means that the ground would have had to have been 32 or 33 feet above sea level for that to happen. And for that to happen, somehow that would have had to have been constructed like that. I mean, unless it's like 1 in a billion chance that's random. I don't buy that at all. So.
Right. And 33, 32, or 33, that's the age of Jesus Christ when he was crucified. It's also how many vertebrae we have in our spine, right? And then that's the number of the degrees in Freemasonry.
Oh yeah.
So
it's also
very symbolic number.
It's also 1/3 of the Trinity, in terms of the Christian belief in the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's, it's technically it's 33.33 repeating, which, it makes. And the other thing about that is that we're actually coming up on the solstice in a few days. I'm very excited about that winter solstice, which of course means it's the shortest day of the year. And then what happens is the sun does not move for 3 plus a little bit extra 3 days. And what I mean by that is that the amount of light it's not increasing yet. There's like a delay of about 3 days. So, part of this, Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days. I say it's 3 1/3 days, and then the sun starts to increase in light every day. And, it's built into the structure of the solar system. Like 33 is a very important mathematical number. And they knew geometry and this high level math and all these secret societies, and a lot of people still use it today. It's very interesting.
Yes. That would have been very old and sacred knowledge, the importance of numbers and geometry, and how this world is constructed along those patterns and those mathematical principles. So the Oslo company didn't give up. They came back the next year, and their idea was to sink another shaft right next to Money Pit and connect it to the Money Pit with horizontal shaft. So you have Money Pit on the side, a new shaft on the other side, and then a tunnel that connected them. But it flooded again. So they got chased away by the tide.
That was shaft 6, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I don't know the number, but it would have been, close enough to Money Pit that they were able to get down and then try to make a horizontal tunnel. But the damned flood tunnels interfered again.
during that process, supposedly they heard a collapse, and Rick Lagina talks about this a lot in the Money Pit. And so the thought is that whatever wood structure was still intact, it actually just caved in and fell down, maybe all the way to the bedrock, which would have been about 150, 160 feet. So,
so it bottomed out in a way.
Exactly, bottomed out. Exactly, great. And so, which means that from here on out, you're not. The idea is thought is not going to be intact. So if you try to get into the Money Pit again, everything's been supposedly spread all over the ground. 150 feet, and there's water everywhere. There's mud everywhere. I mean, it's a mess, complete mess down there.
Right. So, but never give up, never surrender. 45 years later, more men came from the Truro Company or Truro Syndicate. And I believe at least one of the original discoverers of the money pit was involved in the Truro Syndicate. So the Truro Syndicate had money, it had equipment, and they, I believe, sank several shafts. And at one point, they pulled up the drill or the auger, and on it was a piece of gold chain, 3 copper wires, some coconut fiber, and also some kind of an object, some kind of an artifact, which is very mysterious. We really don't know what it was, but it was picked up by this man called James Pigblado, and he put it in his pocket, and his colleague asked him, well, what is it? Can I see it? What did you find? And Pigblado said, no, I'm not going to show it to you today, but I will show it at the next meeting of the shareholders of the Truro Company. Mm-hmm. Well, he didn't show up for the meeting and he kept the artifact. So to this day, we don't know what they pulled up, but they found something.
And by the way, he mysteriously died later.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, in mysterious circumstances. So it's all strange. All the stuff
is
really
I
weird.
know he was a coal miner later in life. After Oak Island, I think he was working in a coal mine somewhere else in Nova Scotia. So, but I don't know much about his death. But this is, I think, the first time that we hear about things being pulled up from underground where, they're made of metal. There is a gold chain. There are copper wires. I don't think that Mother Nature makes copper into wires naturally, right?
Find gold chains underground made at the beginning of the earth.
Yeah. And the coconut fiber too is interesting because I've heard people say, well, in Nova Scotia, you get tropical storms, you get hurricanes that come from the Caribbean, and some of this coconut fiber might have just washed up on the beach, in Smith's Cove and just accumulated over time. But if you find this coconut fiber underground in the middle of the island, I don't think that's because of hurricanes. I think it was put there by humans.
And of course, the idea with the coconut fiber is that it strains the seawater, keeps out the sand and sediment, so that when you have a flood tunnel, you don't get it clogged.
Yeah, and it doesn't decay the way that other materials would. So it's really great for, packing crates on a ship, or, for straining impurities out of water. It will, you can still put it under a microscope hundreds of years later and be able to see that, that's coconut fiber. That's not eelgrass or, some other plant. What we don't know about the coconut fiber is where it came from. I believe there are 2 basic kinds of coconut. One comes from the Indies, and it's spread, I think, from India and Middle East and North Africa, and then onto the islands in the Caribbean. And then there is another family of coconut that's from the Pacific, so from the other side of the world. And that one, the Pacific coconut, is actually what you find in, I think, Central and South America. So depending on where this coconut came from, that if we knew it, we might have a better idea of where these men, brought it from and who they were. Did it come from the eastern part of the world or the Pacific part of the world? So if we're talking, Aztecs or Mayans or Spaniards, they would have had access to that Pacific kind of coconut. That's what I'm trying to express here. Unfortunately, nobody has been able to identify the coconut so far. So from all the samples that we've got, we don't know what kind of coconut it is. So after the Truro Company ran out of money and maybe courage, the story of Oak Island broke out, and of course there were, it was a sensation at the time. I think people immediately assigned it to pirates like Captain Kidd, and it all made sense, to people at the time, that there was pirate treasure hidden on Oak Island, and you just had to dig hard enough to get to it. I don't think there were too many other theories at the time as to what the treasure is. So after the Truro Company, there were many other attempts and, groups of people trying to do something on Oak Island. There were investors. I actually saw a prospectus for investors from the 1800s. And, it promised all these riches once the treasure is found. But interestingly enough, in the prospectus was a mention of a coin from the 1300s that was apparently found on Oak Island, and that had some kind of exotic symbols on it. So whoever found it thought it was from the 1300s and not local, that they couldn't identify the coin. So we also don't have a picture of the coin. We just know that it was mentioned in this prospectus. And at that time, nobody was pushing the Templar theory. So
they just said,
yeah, we have this, coin from the 1300s, and we don't know what it is. So I will jump a little forward in time. So in 1931, we have William Chappell, who is probably the best known for finding what is known as now what we call nowadays Chappell's Vault. I'm pretty sure it was William Chappell and not Mel Chappell that found it.
Which was, of course, father and son, right?
Yes, right. So the father was William.
And he was a Freemason too.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I know his son was. I thought his father was too. But.
Yeah. So the so-called Chappell Vault is said to contain concrete-like material, which is, mystifying, because who would have had concrete at the time? We know that Romans made concrete, right? But it was probably a different formula than what we've got now. But Dave, do you know of anybody who made concrete in the 1700s or 1600s?
Not off the top of my head, I know about the underwater Roman concrete.
Yeah.
But I'll let you continue. I was going to add something.
Okay.
Finish with Chappell as well.
All right. Yeah. So William Chappell thought he found a vault that contained, of course, wood and concrete. And then 3 years later, 1934, we have Gilbert Hedden, who comes to the island, and he built a wharf. Although I have also read that it was a slipway. I don't know what the difference is between wharf and slipway. He found a miner's lamp with whale oil, and he thought it was from 1850. So possibly a searcher artifact. So I don't know what happened to the miner's lamp, if anybody still has it. In 1959 through 1965, we have the Restall family, and this was a family that was struck by a great tragedy. So this was Robert Restall, who was the father, and then Mildred, his wife, and their children. They lived on the island in very rough conditions, but they seemed to be happy to do what they were doing. And the whole family was involved in the treasure hunt. So unfortunately, at one point in time, the men were in a shaft, and they must have dug into a pocket of noxious gas, possibly sulfuric gas, and it disoriented them, and I think even suffocated them in the end. So they were not able to climb out of the shaft and save themselves. And basically almost everybody who went down there to save them died too. So it turned into this horrible multiple tragedy.
Four people died in that event. And then there were actually 2 men that died before that in the search. And so, part of the reason why it's called the Curse of Oak Island is because it's said that 7 people have to die before the treasure is found. Now 6 people have died, so everyone's looking at it saying, okay, well, there's, you know, one more. I don't focus on that story. I don't want to see anyone get hurt, obviously, but that's the legend. Of course, 7's a very mystical number. And I also want to add that the shaft that they died in was actually on the beach. And when you're on the beach and you have a lot of organic material coming in and you know, depositing itself, that's what creates this sulfuric gas, basically.
Oh, okay.
And if it's trapped in a pocket, then it's in there, and then once it's opened, you know, that it all comes flooding out at the same time. But it was also part of the story of, some people think it was actually from the CO2 from the engine that was pumping water out of that.
I see.
The CO2 fell down. But then this is a weird one. Those are the 2 of them. The third one is the strangest one, is that a couple people supposedly reported seeing some kind of green gas or like green mist in this shaft that day. So, you know, I think it might not be what people think it is. It may be something more mystical.
Okay. So the rest dolls have a monument on Oak Island that was erected in their memory. And we know that the Lagina brothers honored the rest dolls big time. They had, I think, more than one episode about the family and invited the survivors onto the show. In the 1960s, we have also Fred Nolan, who comes onto the island. Fred Nolan was a surveyor by trade, and at first he was working with, I believe, was he working with Dan Blankenship? I think so.
Believe it or not, they were in the beginning. Yeah. They actually were.
Yes, and then they had this big falling out. So Fred Nolan was on the island from 1964 through 2016. So he passed away. I never had the chance to meet him. I tried, but he was already very ill. It was something with his lungs, and a personal visit just wasn't possible. So he is famous for surveying his lots on the island and for discovering the so-called Nolan's Cross, which is a very large megalithic cross. It's made of these boulders. People call them cones because they are kind of cone shaped. And the cross spans over 800 feet. Wait, I have it here somewhere, how large it is.
It's like 868 or something like that. Around 860 something. Yeah.
Okay, so it's 867 feet long or tall, and then 720 feet wide. So it's a big cross. And when you think about it, anybody who put it in place would have had to clear the land, right, of the trees so that they would have a line of sight, because it's so perfectly aligned that it's, you know, it just doesn't look natural or like an accident. So
and that's of course what Fred noticed, because he was a professional surveyor. But when he was surveying the island, he said, "Wait a minute, these rocks, and they're like Alessandra said, they're very distinctive. You're not going to mistake another rock for these rocks in the cross." But he saw that they were perfect measurements, and they were there's a right angle between the cross arms and the body of the cross. And so he developed interest, as I would have. I mean, you're on a treasure island after all, so
right. Yeah. So where does the cross point? Of course, my first question. And some people say it points to Jerusalem. And right there, I feel like, okay, it was not pirates doing there. I don't think they were particularly godly people. It would have been somebody else who was spiritual or religious, right? And who wanted to align themselves with
was that the Jerusalem. Was that the first thing that you saw that pointed you towards a religious group, potentially, of people?
Well, I think so. It was at first the cross, and then the coin from the 1300s, and then other things later.
The cross was actually in season 1. I mean, so that was the very beginning of the show, and that's what got me even involved too. Was actually Petter Amundsen. I think he was Norwegian theorist. I think he was in like the 3rd episode of season 1.
Yeah.
And I saw the cross and I said, that's perfect math. I have to look into this.
Yes. And this is where I think that Oak Island has the sacred space on it, and it's within the range of Nolan's Cross because centuries ago people were deeply spiritual or religious, and I think that material treasure was not as important to them as the salvation of their soul. So these complex works on Oak Island, I think, were not just to hide material treasure like gold and silver. If we are talking about a group of Christians that did something on Oak Island, it would have been drilled into them from the day they were born to value spiritual treasure over a material one. Mm-hmm. In the 21st century, we have become quite materialistic, and for us, gold is the no-brainer.
Right, yeah.
But centuries ago, it was not the case. I mean, people still needed it and wanted it and coveted it. But to go into all this trouble and danger of, carrying out these complex civil engineering works on Oak Island and risking your life over something, I think it speaks about a greater purpose than material treasure. I think it's a spiritual treasure of some kind.
Oh, definitely. I agree 100% with you. And also the thing that's interesting is that Nolan's Cross is actually on the other side of the island from the money pit. And there's what's called the swamp in between it. Right. There's this big swamp that's like very triangular. So the thing that's interesting about this for me too is that appears to potentially be two different treasure sites or more. So the focus now it's always been on the money pit, really. People are still, believe it or not, we are still trying to find what is under the ground of the money pit.
Yeah, well, and maybe we have material treasure and spiritual treasure on Oak Island. Yeah. So money pit is where you can find the material treasure, and then if you want to feed your soul, you walk over to Nolan's Cross and stand in the alignment with Jerusalem on earth and the Northern Cross up in the sky, because there's this constellation called Northern Cross or Swan or Cygnus. It's all one and the same, that passes over Nolan's Cross on a regular basis. So it's beautiful. If you like the concept of as above, so below, then you have to stand next to Nolan's Cross, because that's where it's going to happen for you. That's where you will witness that.
And of course, we both had experiences there, Alessandra. I've been at the cross as well. I've been most of the stones of the cross too, except for the one on the beach. I've been to all the other stones of the cross, and it's just very peculiar. I mean, you look at it, and there's also supposedly that Fred Nolan dug in the center of the cross, meaning where the cross arms meet the body of the cross, and he found a stone shaped like a head.
And yes, I saw it.
Right, and of course I've seen it as well, and it appears to possibly be looking at something. We don't know, because it might have been reoriented, but everything about this island is very, very peculiar, and you just don't, like Alessandra said, you don't go through that much work to bury like one chest of treasure or something like that, like a pirate's treasure. There's got to be something. I mean, it is ridiculous, the idea that you're protecting something with flood tunnels on an island from the ocean, and there's hundreds of feet beneath the ground. I mean, there's something very strange going on here.
Yes. So about that stone, people call it the headstone or skull stone, and it is flat, unlike the other boulders, which are cone shaped. So this stone is very flat, but if you look at it from a certain angle, you can make out a face or a skull. So you see the jaw and the nose and the arch of the brow, and you can see a human face, or at least a skull in that stone. It's not hard to notice. And then there is this dagger-like shape over the temple of that head or that skull, and it does look like either a Roman sword or a dagger, like a really long dagger. I have thought about the headstone many times, and I keep coming back to two names. One is John the Baptist, who was very important to Christians, and of course the Knights Templar who revered him. He was their saint, Saint John the Baptist, and he was beheaded because he crossed the king. And the other name, or the other person that could be connected to the headstone, is Jesus Christ, because he was crucified on a hill called Golgotha, which means skull. So we have, a reference to a skull, and the headstone is in the middle of the cross. You've got the stem of the cross and the arm, and smack in the middle where they intersect is this headstone. So Jesus was crucified, and he was crucified on a hill called the Skull. And here we have a stone shaped like a skull in the middle of that cross. So who knows? But it definitely makes you think. Oak Island makes you think, because it has all these layers and subtleties that are easy to miss if you're not paying attention. And you can't just pay attention with your mind, with your intellect. You have to also stay attuned to your heart and your sixth sense, because Oak Island does give out these vibes. Oh, yeah. And you can feel them. You can feel them sometimes, more strongly than other times, but they're there. It's not a normal place. It's a very mysterious place.
It's very highly charged spiritually. Mm-hmm. And like Alessandra said, you need to really be on your toes, because you never know what's going to be coming around. What I found was that, in terms of me, it was I'll speak energetically in general. It was respectful of me being there, my presence there, but felt like it was, somewhat of a guardian type energy, or watching, observing kind of energy.
Right.
And I did have a couple opportunities when I was taking measurements. Again, it's a treasure hunt, so you're trying to figure out where you're going to dig and everything. And it was essentially thwarted. I mean, it was a completely calm day. There was nothing, no wind or anything like that. And I'm out there trying to get a very simple measurement, which should have taken probably about 45 seconds. And then right as I'm stretching out the tape measure, I think I told you this, Alessandra, but right as I'm stretching out the tape measure, a huge gale of wind comes by, and not only does it blow it off the line I'm trying to measure, but it actually somehow managed to tangle it impossibly. So then when I recovered it, I'm not even kidding. It had like 10 knots in it, and it was one. Yeah, and they were like tight knots, and it was one blow of wind. So I come over to it. I'm like, no, that's not even possible.
Wait, 10 knots? The number 10? What's going on, Dave?
Well, you know what I mean. It was somewhere around there. It was more than a few.
Okay.
But I'm out there, I'm out there measuring essentially by myself, because everyone else had things. It's a busy island, guys. They had stuff to do.
Yes.
I was just trying to get
it's non-stop activity, except in the winter.
Exactly. So anyway, I basically had to give up for the day, and I just looked up to the sky and I said, I know that was purposeful, and I'm gonna.
I know it was you.
Yeah, exactly. Whoever that is, and I'm gonna respect that. And I just went back to the hotel, and I was in the day.
Yeah. Oh, my husband, Tim, he did some measurements for the Oak Island team in the past, and he was using some highly specialized and sensitive equipment that measures electromagnetic fields and stuff like that. And he had these sensors spread out over the island, and several of them just went offline, seemingly randomly, without warning. And at first they were battery powered, and he would always put fresh batteries in the sensors before leaving them on the island. These batteries, they would just get drained in impossibly short time. And he was so frustrated because these sensors would just go offline, and he would have to go back to the island, put in the batteries. Eventually, I think I told him to change the design so that the sensors were solar powered.
Oh, good. Smart.
It was much harder to suck the energy out of that. But yeah, there is something on the island that messes with equipment. You will have vehicles that just won't start, or heavy equipment that suddenly doesn't start. And it's not just that the battery is drained. sometimes you will see a hose just ripped out, like yanked out. I think that happened on the show at least once, where they had some kind of heavy equipment and it involved a hydraulic hose, and it was like physically disconnected, and nobody disconnected itself.
It's always right before a big discovery too.
Yes, of course.
It's seriously, every time this happens, you're right about to discover it, and then suddenly you're thwarted. So that's why I suggested that there's something being protected.
Yeah, and a number of these treasure hunters, they had strange experiences on the island. So Fred Nolan, for example, was afraid of the crows on the island. I believe he thought that they followed him around, that that they were like a bad omen.
The story was. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, good.
Oh, I just wanted to say that he supposedly never slept on the island, never spent a night there, always left before dark. And that's a grown man, right? What was he afraid of? So something must have happened to him.
Yeah, they're supposed to be the spirits of dead pirates or something that went to the crows. I believe that was part of the story. I mean, it could be anything, but he's not the only one. I mean, Marty Lagina, one of the other owners of the island, he was completely scared, senseless at the money pit area. And then it was funny because Rick had already, his brother Rick Lagina, he had already kind of left the money pit, and Marty was out there by himself. I think they met halfway on the road. And Marty was coming back. Rick's like, "What? Why are you coming back so early?" He's like, "No, let's just get off the island," because something spooked him. He heard some kind of a scream or a yell or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was a scream. Yeah. Oh
yeah, and there's stories of like literally essentially werewolf, humanoid monsters with red eyes. That was around the money pit. There's basically like balls of fire that just float off the ocean and float onto the island.
Orbs.
I mean, orbs, exactly. There's ghosts of British soldiers and stuff. I mean, it's ridiculous. And if you haven't been on the island, it might sound fantastical, but to be quite honest, it seems like there's everything here. It seems like everyone's been here somehow, and all the energies are mixing in. So it's always exciting for sure.
So I was on the island one time under mysterious circumstances. I believe it was winter solstice, and as you know, winter solstice is like at 5 a.m. and it's very dark. And I was on the island at the time. It was very dark. There was snow on the ground, and I had a flashlight, and I was being very brave, or so I thought. And then I saw this light in the distance and among the trees, and I thought, oh, it's the sunrise, right? It's the sun rising above the horizon. And suddenly the light shifted, and I was like, oh, that's not sunrise, that's something else. And I did feel nervous, and I decided to leave very politely. When I left, I didn't want to know what that light was.
Wow.
In case it came toward me, because I was alone, So.
I don't think we ever talked about that one. That's really interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. It's yes, one of my adventures. So
I've had I've had lots of very
Karen wants a word.
Yeah, Karen, go for it.
Oh, sorry. No, this is so fascinating, but we're really quickly running out of time. And I just wanted to draw your attention to that and ask you if you have any kind of a final wrap up you want to tell the viewers about Oak Island. We definitely have to have you back, because we barely even scratched the surface this time. But yeah, and then after you do that, please tell everybody where they can find you, Alessandra, what you're up to and where they can find you and all that kind of good stuff.
Okay, so I'm sorry we ran out of time to talk about the series. Maybe we can cover them in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I would just want to encourage people to pick up a book, any book about Oak Island. They will learn so much about the history of Nova Scotia, what went on in the 17 and 1800s. And if they can, please visit in person. We are now open for tourists after 2 years of pandemic. They might not be able to tour Oak Island, but they can, like on foot, but they can take a boat tour with Tony Sampson, who is one of the divers that you see on the show. He has a boat tour where he takes you around the island and he narrates, he tells you the story of the treasure hunt. He sometimes even brings his own artifacts on board, the things that he found while he was diving. So it's pretty cool. And of course, you can visit other sites in Nova Scotia. You can visit New Ross Farm Museum, where Carmen Legg used to work. You can go to Port Royal, which is an old French fortress in Annapolis Valley. You can, of course, visit Halifax, the Citadel, the old churches, and there's a museum of natural history. And then we have the Maritime Museum, which is quite beautiful on the Halifax waterfront. So there are a lot of things to see, and people don't realize that Nova Scotia was the gateway to Canada back in the 1600s and 1700s. So everybody passed through here and left a mark. So please come see it for yourself. And you might even meet some of the crew from Oak Island, because they do go for drinks in Mug and Anchor. It's a pub in Mahone Bay. And you never know who you will run into.
Definitely. If you want to tell people where they can find you too, Alessandra, your website and everything.
So I have a website called Adventures of Nicky, www.adventuresofnicky.com. And I'm also on Facebook under my name, Alessandra Nadudvari. I have an author page. I don't generally accept friend requests from total strangers. So you would have to come recommended to me by somebody I already know. But you are free to follow the author page. And on YouTube, I have a channel called Templar Island. And you can you can look up the interview I did with Dave Petrella about 6 months ago, where we talked very expansively about the spiritual and astronomical and astrological aspects of Oak Island.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I mean, I had a great time. I hope everyone enjoyed this. We will definitely have you back, right, Karen? There's so much more to cover. And until then, we really appreciate it. We hope everyone has a nice week. And I guess we'll see you guys in January, right, Karen?
Yeah, we got a season 2 starting in January. Can't wait. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you, Alessandra. It was very interesting. Very interesting show. Thank you so much.
I also want to wish you and your audience Merry Christmas and all the best in the new year.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. And Dave, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining Dave and I for the Aliens and Astrology show. Become the change you want to see in the world. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, click the like button, and share this show with your friends. Check out Karen's website at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. All the links will be in the description box below. Until the next time, keep up the good work.
Well, you challenge my perception. I shift uneasily as I try to justify how I value your suggestions. Ideas full of life when I'm empty of my own. And 5 minutes before I was okay, now the curtain drops to the floor. Leaves me weak and begging for more. When I think I get it, it flutters and vanishes away.